And today we're going to cover the most garbage argument for theism that undercuts the character of God and his relationship to mankind, as well as performs a ton of mental gymnastics. I'm covering apologetics squared, or should I say, apologetics scared of reality. This argument drives me completely batshit crazy because of what it does to design arguments and the rest of Christian theology, as well as the conflations it makes and assumptions it makes that are just completely unwarranted. So, we're going to listen to this little ditty so that we can have lunch with Nitty. So, eat your lunch, sit back, and get on the ride because I'm just so done with this argument. Like I
Hello! Remember when I said in part 4 of this series that I was going to argue for theism cumulatively rather than in one fell swoop? Well, that was a lie. In this video, I'm going to present the argument from psychophysical harmony, which I would venture to say is a proof of theism, stronger than all other arguments for God combined. Now, even though I've gone over epistemology a lot in this
remember my claim that if this argument is true, God is a complete piece of shit. Okay?
series, I'm going to start with a bit of a refresher because I think that half the difficulty of this argument is getting the epistemology straight. So let's jump into that. The main thing that
So, we're going to talk for a really long time about how we know epistemology, the study of your knowledge of a claim, before we get to the implications of this argument. Okay.
you need to be comfortable with for this argument to make any sense is using probabilistic reasoning in scenarios where the outcome had to turn out the way it actually does turn out. An example I've used a lot is the probability that, say, the googolith digit of pi is 7. You might say, this probability is either 100% or 0%, but since no one has calculated that far, we don't know which it is. I understand what this answer is getting at, but a better answer is to say, hey, each digit is as probable as any other, as far as I can tell. So, even though the digits of pi are dictated by mathematics, from my perspective, the probability is 1 in 10. All this is totally valid probabilistic reasoning, even though the digits of pi have to have the values that they do have.
All right. Yeah, that's fine.
This kind of probability that, roughly speaking, is more concerned with our judgments rather than what goes on out there in the world is called epistemic probability. We can use this epistemic probability stuff in other contexts as well, like science. For example, what's the probability that water is H2O? Well, it's actually 100% because water just is H2O. However, we didn't always know this fact. Scientists discovered this through experimentation. If we were to imagine ourselves in the...
No, water is H2O because that's what we define as water. We can change the definition of water. What about flavored water? Okay, I added an adjective, but it's H2O plus a bunch of other stuff intermixed with the H2O. And also, many forms of water are not simply just standalone H2O molecules. In fact, you can have a harder form of water. I believe it's like H3O. And if you dive into a pool of H3O, you die because it's so dense.
In the place of these scientists, we would say the epistemic probability of the claim that water is H2O would be low prior to any experimentation. Then, after some experiments on water are performed that reveal it is H2O, the epistemic probability goes up. Okay, now that we have a handle on epistemic probability, I want to ask you, what's the epistemic probability of this fact? When C fibers fire in someone's brain, they feel pain. Now, the epistemic...
Okay, so if God designed our DNA to produce neural fibers that create our lived experiences, if our DNA is this magical orchestra that produces the affect of our human experience, and that includes fibers that can render pain experiences, then God designed pain. Sit with that, apologetics scared. Unless he didn't design that, our C fibers or our neuro makeups completely the artifacts of sin. So, how did God create in us or remove from us the ability to not make C fibers? What? Also, pain is completely subjective. Pain is not an objective reality. This argument, or at least this part of making this argument, is trying to objectify a concept of a subjective experience. In fact, some things we may categorize as pain, but are just our body's natural responses that aren't actually hurting us. Or it's possible that it could be something that's not actually hurting us or detrimental to our existence. A good example of this would be like, uh, I have like a condition that requires me to take medication so that I subside that condition. But it's really just, I have a sensation of pain, but really it's not anything that's actively hurting me. It's just that my inner bowel wiggles. It just wiggles too much. And if I take medication, it stops wiggling. So I'm experiencing something that I label as pain or registers to me as pain, but that pain is not objective. It's very subjective. It's nominal at best, or most days, and it's not something that I would say exists for all time or eternity, or has the same values across different agents or conditions. You just can't do this. And what if, like, I liked when I felt this way? Would I still have that pain label associated with it? No. We're playing a language game with an experience that we have. So dumb.
Epistemic probability of this is actually about 100%, since C fibers have been shown through experimentation to be the nerves responsible for pain. But I want to know, prior to these experiments, what epistemic probability should we have assigned to this proposition? If you didn't know any neuroscience and were just shown the physical structure of a C fiber, what would be the epistemic probability that its firing would be connected to the experience, or if you want to be fancy, the qualia of pain, rather than, say, the experience of pleasure or the experience of seeing red? Now, there are a lot of theories in the philosophy of mind about the nature of the connection between physical C fibers and the mental experience of pain. Some people think that we have a material body and an immaterial soul, and these are interacting.
Not I, said the cat.
Some people think we're purely physical, and the connection between pain and C fibers firing is the same connection between water and H2O, just two sides of the same coin. Some people think that minds are fundamental, and the material world is all reducible to consciousness, and
Ooh, panpsychism gets unmentioned.
so on. Now, it may seem like we need to figure out which of these theories is true before we can answer my original question, but we don't. Nothing within the tenets of any of these theories would affect our judgment about whether the particular mental experience of pain would be connected to the particular physical structure of a C fiber. If some philosopher had never studied any neuroscience, no amount of pondering these theories on his armchair would bring him an inch closer to realizing that pain, rather than some other experience, is connected to C fibers. He would need to do some experiments to figure that out. So whatever answer we give to my original question here, it's going to be completely independent of your views on the nature of mind and the nature of the physical world.
Oh, good.
Now, your theory may end up affecting the actual or metaphysical probability, so to speak, that C fibers are connected to pain, but it won't affect the epistemic probability at all. And that's what matters. So, now that I've hopefully convinced you that we can set aside all these controversies in the philosophy of mind, let's actually get to answering my question. It seems that prior to experimentation, nothing in our knowledge of the world, nor even in our intuitions, would lead us to expect that the experience of pain would be connected to C fibers rather than any other experiences. If we made a big list of statements like C fibers are connected with the experience of pain, and C fibers are connected with the experience of pleasure, and C fibers are connected with the experience of seeing red, and C fibers are connected with the experience of feeling warm bath water, and so on, none of these statements would be more probable than any other prior to experimentation. This is analogous to how, out of the statements, the googolith digit of pi is 1 and the googolith digit of pi is 2, and so on, no statement is more probable than any other prior to calculating the digit.
Actually, there would be limits to um, C fibers and their correlative experience by the nature of what you define as a C fiber. So, like, if and I'm assuming this is like either nerves or neurological connections, right? So, uh, if neurological connections have experience red because we agree on all the definitions of both of those things, it can't experience otherwise. The probability is one. Or maybe like that same set of neural connections experiences red, purple, blue, blah, 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 because we've included more of the system or what have you, or the ends of our finger are capable of experience, light touch, hot touch, hard touch, cold touch. Um, but the probabilities of each of those touches are limited to the very nature of what we define as those nerves. So we can't go beyond the actual makeup of those materials, much like the googolith digit of pi's probability is limited to 1 in 10. Like, so our C fiber experience probabilities, if we posit their existence or we agree on what we're talking about here, are going to be limited by the actual composition and their nature. Unless we want to just dance around with definitions. And again, if if our DNA are these magical, awesome machines that God designed, and there's fibers correlative to pain, God designed pain. In fact, God designed sin because aren't there C fibers experiencing lust? Aren't there C fibers experiencing envy, strife, bitterness, jealousy, rage, rape? I don't know. Do you? Unless, again, the effects of sin were also designed to create these experiences that God knows in advance and gives us definitions for, which map to brain states, which God also designed. Damn it. What a mess.
With the pi case, we concluded that the probability that the googolith digit of pi is 7 is 1 divided by the total number of possible digits, that is 1 divided by 10. Note, when I say possible digits, I mean possible in an epistemic sense, because it's mathematically impossible that the digits be different.
Right.
We can use parallel reasoning to find that the probability that C fibers are connected with pain is going to be in the ballpark of 1 divided by the total number of epistemically possible experiences. There are a
No,
lot of
no,
epistemically
no,
possible experiences.
no, 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 no. Um, yes, there are a lot of epistemically possible experiences, but it depends on what fibers or neural connections or nerve endings we're talking about. Like, the tip of my penis can only have so many types of experiences, okay? Like it can't experience joy. It experiences pleasure to the rest of my body, but it doesn't go, "Yay, Merry Christmas." God damn it.
Experiences, so this probability is going to be very small. Coolio.
Oh wait, it would say Merry Dixmas.
Now, there's nothing special about C fibers here. This reasoning applies to any physical structure that's connected to any mental experience. In fact, let's imagine a big list of all physical structures, like C fibers, dopamine receptors, and so on, and the mental experiences associated with them. A list like this one here is called a set of psychophysical laws. Now, I want to ask another question. What's the epistemic probability that we get the specific set of psychophysical laws that we do in fact have? Well, it's going to be the probability that C fibers are connected to pain, times the probability that pleasure is connected to dopamine receptors firing, times the probability that yada yada yada, all the way down the list. Each of the probabilities in the
All of those are one because of the nature of the materials. Like, and and what is a psychophysical law supposed to be anyway? Is it just that uh, neural connections and nerve endings are correlative to some kind of experience? Then the probability is one, because that's just how our bodies function to survive. And again, all of this, if this argument succeeds, then once again, God designed sin experiences. He designed the crucifixion to be terrible, to being naked and beaten and flogged and bleeding and ashamed. He designed all that. It's almost like he wanted all that to happen. Whee!
in this long multiplication are going to be ridiculously tiny. So the probability of getting the specific set of psychophysical laws that we observe is super duper ridiculously tiny. An equivalent way of thinking about this is that the number of different epistemically possible sets of psychophysical laws is super duper ridiculously huge. And there are so many other ways we can imagine our set of psychophysical laws being that the probability of getting our specific laws is tiny. For example, an epistemically possible set of psychophysical laws different from our own is one where C fibers are connected to the taste of cherries, and dopamine receptors are connected to the smell of sawdust, and so on. Just fill in the list with a random jumble of experiences, and bam, you've got another set.
If we scooped out his prefrontal cortex, took away his higher executive functions, would he say that 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 type of experience is expected under this, is part of the psychophysical laws, and then for their own lived experience they could not arrive at the same definitions or experiences as anybody else? So just ugh. Right, Fenton, like probabilities are like God can just always do the improbable, or vice versa. He can just always do what's probable. It doesn't, and that's just to our estimations. Yeah, probabilities are meaningless to an omnipotent being. That's completely right, Fenton.
Set of psychophysical laws. And remember, prior to any experimentation, we have absolutely no reason to label these other sets of psychophysical laws as more or less probable than our own. So this vast array of sets of psychophysical laws are all roughly equally probable, and any particular set of psychophysical laws, like the one we find in our world, is therefore super duper unlikely. Now that we've gone through all of that, we can get to the crux of this argument. Out of this ridiculously huge amount of different epistemically possible sets of psychophysical laws, almost all of them are going to produce entirely chaotic experiences. If they turned out to be the
chaotic because you define them as chaotic. What? So let's say a virus existed, much like that or fungus rather, exists that completely takes over the um, the executive functions of a creature, much like the fungus that takes over small insects, um, and infects them and grows on them and basically zombifies them so that then they get to the highest tree branch, produce spores and release their spores and do that thing, right? Um, now, if we got um, if we got that virus, um, we would think, oh, chaotic experience. This totally sucks. But that's just the way the damn thing operates. Okay. People around me are turning into zombies and they're getting to the highest tree branch. Oh, wait. No, sorry. They're going to the mall, even though they're pretty sure they have COVID and they're just spreading it around. It doesn't make a damn difference to them or COVID. They're just doing it. And while it seems chaotic to us, it doesn't matter. Yeah, cordyceps. Uh, yeah, that's the fungi. It's chaotic because we say it's chaotic, not because it's actually objectively chaotic. It's just how the thing operates. So if everyone got that zombie virus and was spreading it, it's just the deterministic interactions of the chemicals involved in the brain. So the probability would be one.
True set of psychophysical laws, it would be impossible to have any coherent understanding of the world whatsoever. Maybe you can see some intuition behind this, but how do I demonstrate that this is true? Well, now we come to a fork in the road. Basically, everyone agrees that the physical stuff in the world affects the mental stuff, like experiences. For example, if you stub your toe, you feel pain. However, there's disagreement on whether the reverse is true. Does the experience of pain affect the physical world?
What if I stub my toe in orgasm?
Like, do molecules actually move, not because of any physical force, but because some
Like always, like it's not like a once-off occasion. Like that's just what happens.
mental thing caused them to move? On some theories in the philosophy of mind, the answer is yes, and on other theories, the answer is no. The argument from psychophysical harmony works no matter what you answer, but your answer will affect the structure of the argument. Let's first see how the argument would work if the mental world does not affect the physical world. On a view like this, when you stub your toe and then begin to nurse it, your entire mental life, including your pain, doesn't play any role in what your body is doing. That department is entirely controlled by physical processes, including C fibers firing. Experiences are just a fifth wheel. So what would happen if the psychophysical laws were different? Let's choose a set of psychophysical laws where C fibers are connected to pleasure, for example.
Exactly, yeah.
If this set of laws were actual, then when you stub your toe, you'd feel pleasure.
Oh!
However, all the same physical processes would happen, with all the same nerves firing, and your body would react the same way, nursing your hurt toe. There would be a total mismatch between what you experienced and what was going on in the physical world. There would be
No. It's not a mismatch to you. I've categorized this before and figured this out before, that what if everyone in the world had synesthesia, where the someone rings a bell and we have the seemings of red going on in our head because it's Christmas, right? But that's the normative labeled experience for everyone else in the world, while it's quite possible that those same neural connections or fibers or matter and materials could not experience synesthesia. And then the person not having synesthesia would be the outlier. We would call them the chaos one. What? You don't have purple farts disorder? How do you not see purple when you fart?
psychophysical disharmony. Again, we've run this thought experiment with C fibers being connected to pleasure. But we could have instead run it with C fibers being connected to experiencing the smell of grass, the color purple, the texture of wood, and so on. It quickly becomes clear that if we choose almost anything except pain, then our internal experience of the world would get really crazy. And each of these alternative sets of psychophysical laws is just as probable as the actual set of psychophysical laws prior to experimentation.
What if we were like Christmas crabs, which we ran around on our island of Earth, and we had just tons of babies. Like we could reproduce like in a day, and we lay our eggs, and our babies are hatching, and all to all our seemings, we're hungry, and we gotta eat them babies. Oh, we need more energy to make more babies. That is not crazy to us. That's just what we derive from our seemings, is how we do to reproduce. Our brains can't tell us otherwise. We're hungry. There's lots of babies to eat. We, what if we were all Christmas crabs? Like that, it might not be the most pleasurable experience, but we recognize it in for the greater reward of laying more eggs and having more babies in the future, that we eat the babies we need to now. How would we say that that's bad or crazy? That's just what our physical and neurochemical makeup of delayed gratification deem upon us.
And this was just C fibers. Our brains are chock full of physical structures that we could run similar thought experiments on. The chance of getting just one of these physical structures to be connected with a sensible and coherent experience is astronomically small. But getting them all to align? The probability of that is super duper astronomically small. In all likelihood, if we were to choose a completely random set of psychophysical laws, then it would lead to a completely incoherent experience of reality. Your mental experience during a mundane physical activity, like walking to the fridge and getting a glass of milk, would probably just be a jumble of tastes, colors, or experiences you've never even imagined.
And then a creature like you would probably not survive very long in reality, now would you? And the creatures that have the most correlation to their environment keep surviving. Sure, okay. This is completely explainable on an evolutionary and physical hypothesis. If you try to do things outside of actually interacting with your environment properly, if I try to reproduce right now on stream with this electrical outlet behind me, and because I think it's a valid receptacle for my seed, I might not exist for very much longer. Right? And the the nature of my environment dictates that behavior and outcome. Yeah, sure, to everyone else's seemings it's bizarre and would probably get, some channel strikes, but yeah.
As your brain performed all its normal functions. But what if we think that mental stuff like experiences can affect the physical world? Well, in that case, we need to ask, what are the effects that mental stuff has on the physical world? Does pain cause nerves to vibrate? Does pleasure make hydrogen atoms heavier? What physical effects do experiences have? Whatever the answers may be, let's make a big list of them. When you experience pain, it causes physical effect X, and when you experience pleasure, it causes physical effect Y, and so on. Now our set of psychophysical laws has two components. First, the connections that we already looked at between physical structures and experiences. And now a second component with how these experiences in turn affect the physical world. This changes the thought experiment. Let's say, for the sake of argument, whenever you stub your toe, your body acts in completely the wrong way, unless you get the physical effect X that pain causes.
No, so again, that's wrong by the definitions of the consensus. right? What it like in a synesthesia, a worldwide synesthesia example, um, wrong would be not seeing purple when you fart. Everybody else does, but you don't. So if the consensus definition of these experiences is that farting makes me see purple, then the wrong experience is not seeing purple when you fart. Right, exactly. Wrong because it's not what I'm used to, or I don't particularly prefer it. Ooh. Oh, okay. So is the experience of revulsion to an unhijabed woman normal or wrong? Because people who have outgroup biases or bigotry or think 100 years ago in our country, the United States, the experienced revulsion to someone of dark skin color, like a mental sensation like icky, ooh, or two men kissing. Icky, don't kiss, men. Don't do that. Don't do the butt stuff. I'm revulsed by that. Uh, some people aren't. Are those feelings all categorically wrong because they're against our updated consensus of what lived human experiences should be? So if the mental state of revulsion to the unhijabed woman is wrong, then there's a lot of people having mental experiences of seeing unhijabed women and experiencing revulsion that are wrong. And they can't think otherwise because they're psychophysically screwed up to our estimations. Same goes for men kissing. I wish I had a dude here to kiss. I hope my wife doesn't see this. I can't tell if she's home. I'm wearing noise canceling headphones.
Causes. Then one could argue, hey, even if some entirely different physical structure was connected with pain, evolution would actively seek out that physical structure so that we could behave in a survival promoting way. So we are guaranteed to feel pain when we stub our toes, and we are guaranteed to have psychophysical harmony. The problem with this response is that we can use all the same reasoning employed on the first component of the laws on the second component as well. There are a ton of epistemically possible variations of how experiences can affect the physical world, and the probability of getting our laws, where pain is associated with physical effect X, is tiny. We can just as easily imagine
Always Melody Joy, especially when they're topless.
pleasure rather than pain being connected to C fibers and physical effect X. And since this is just as likely as pain having those connections, we are led once again to the conclusion that a scenario where you stub your toe and then feel pleasure, but nonetheless nurse your toe, is just as probable as you feeling pain, or any other experience for that matter. So, even if the mental world could affect the physical world, it would still be just as astronomically improbable that you would have a coherent experience of reality. I think a useful illustration is imagining the physical world as the inputs for
But again, that's all coherent based on consensus seemings, right? What's normative and coherent to most average humans might not be normative or coherent to others. Take, for example, the experience of elation in a worship service. Is that coherent and normative? A Christian worship service, is that coherent and normative to a Buddhist? No. To a Muslim? Nope. So uh, if there are if there are incoherent experiences that are coherent to others, then this argument seems to fall apart, that we can never arrive at a definitive set of things that we can categorically say are always coherent experiences. Seeing a ghost. Some people in lots of these YouTube live chats say that they've experienced miracles, they have intercourse, coitus with God in their dreams, they have received divine revelations. Those are coherent experiences. But to the rest of us, we're like, huh? Something's going on in your psychophysical that is not coherent to me, or not what I'm experiencing. And so we would bucket them as incoherent experiences, or in some state of disharmony. Yeah, exactly, Fenton. So, yeah, the idea of attraction and repulsion, right? Some things of attraction are very coherent, real experiences to people, and to others who don't have that kink, not so much. All right. Look at the trees. What's up?
For our mental experiences, with arrows pointing from the different physical structures to the experiences they are connected to. In this picture, the set of psychophysical laws just is the collection of all those arrows. If there's no way for the mental to affect the physical, then we can just change what the arrows are pointing at to illustrate what would happen if the psychophysical laws were different. And most of the ways we could change the arrows would lead to chaos on the mental side. If the mental can affect the physical, then we need more arrows. These new arrows on the right represent the effects that mental experiences have on the physical world. Maybe evolution would care about promoting certain physical effects, but this doesn't tell us anything at all about what the mental world would look like.
It doesn't care. It's the fundamental interactions of the materials.
It just tells us that mental experiences whose arrows happen to be pointing at such and such physical effects would be promoted. But there are no restrictions on what the arrows can point at, so evolution is not more prone to promoting any one kind of experience over any other in a given circumstance. So we would expect, once again, utter mental chaos. Now, there are other theories.
I mean, that is kind of what we have when we try and explain the behaviors of particular religious folks. So, like, I wish I had a, let's see, so, Pentecostal worship. Yeah, baby. Let's get it. Let's get it. Let's have a coherent experience. Let's see. Yes. This is determined by the psychophysical laws. Jiggle, wiggle, get it. Go, buddy, go. Yes, this is completely expected under theism. This is totally coherent to all of us, right? Give it to him. Let's see what we got here. Dancing. Let's get the dancing in here. Yeah.
Everywhere that I look, everything
All right, that's enough. Oh, I started replaying the video. Damn it. Sorry about that. I hope that was fun. I hope that made someone giggle. Okay.
I've explored here. However, as far as I can see, the same logic would apply to them. The only difference would be that the arrows would represent something other than causation. Okay, after all that deep philosophy, we have finally gotten to a valuable piece
So deep, so mumbo jumbo.
of information. Reality should not make sense. It is astronomically improbable that the connections between the physical structures in your brain and your mental experiences would mesh together in a coherent and understandable way. Your mind should be utter chaos, not just a little chaotic, but entirely nonsense. At least this is what we would expect if naturalism is true, because nothing
No, that's not what we expect.
within the tenets of naturalism would block the chain of reasoning laid out in this video. Let's get probability space drawn up to reflect that. Now, what do we put on the theism side of the probability space? Well, having a mental life that is not complete chaos is a good thing. In fact, it's a prerequisite.
So is a mental life like the Apostle Paul's a good thing? Was that harmonious? Was that non-chaotic? I'm pretty sure the Apostle Paul was having a little bit of a chaotic experience. And if we're to take him at his word, that chaotic experience was good. He was living in this already not yet state where he has to affirm some truths about his existence that he does not experience in reality, that he's perfectly righteous, that he's sinless, that he's got a future in heaven awaiting him. So that seems he if we take the Apostle Paul at his word, he lived in constant cognitive dissonance. And in fact, he pursued suffering and pain. The Christian is exhorted to live disharmoniously with everything else and everyone else around them. So a non-chaotic mental state seems unchristian, or not good. So if we take Christian ethics and Christian living seriously, or we take the Apostle Paul at his words, the non-chaotic mental life would be one of apathy towards God and his mission, apathy toward Jesus, laziness, slothfulness, the things that God says are bad, or unevangelizing. Whoops, I don't think you want that.
Requisite for almost any other good that creatures can experience. And theism predicts that God would bring about good things, so theism very strongly predicts that our minds would not be filled with utter nonsense and chaos. Rather, theism predicts,
Yeah, Leo, this is basically like putting the evolutionary argument against naturalism in a giant Christmas box and calling it psychophysical harmony. Merry Christmas.
that we would have psychophysical harmony. So, we now need to update on the fact that your mind isn't complete chaos. When we do this, almost all of naturalism is scribbled away, and when we stretch back to a square, theism totally dominates the probability space, and naturalism is reduced to a minuscule speck. Coolio. Let's now go through some objections to this argument. The most common objection is that naturalism predicts that we could get psychophysical harmony via evolution. I've already addressed this objection earlier in the video, so we can move on to the next one. Another objection is that since this is sort of like a fine-tuning argument, maybe we can posit a multiverse to diffuse it. This won't work.
I bet you $1 bajillion the argument of the classical Christian apologetics for intelligent design, especially when it comes to the special creation of man, and objecting to this argument based on Christian theism will not be addressed.
In your standard fine-tuning argument, a multiverse works by positing a bunch of universes that are physically different from each other, and you would only get observers in universes that exhibit fine-tuning, so it would be unsurprising that we as observers would witness fine-tuning. But if we pause
I'm gonna skip that.
cover in this video is what I like to call the argument from psycho-divine harmony. The basic idea here is that there are laws governing God's mind, and they're going to be pretty complicated laws because God's mind is infinite. And if we're positing a being with complicated laws governing his mind in order to explain the complicated laws governing our own minds, then it seems like we're just kicking the can up the road. Now, I think that this objection is partially confused, and I have a hunch to where this confusion came from. When proponents of this argument, like Dustin Crummett, present an intuitive summary of the argument, they say something along the lines of, the physical world and our mental experiences line up in a really fortunate way. When I have the experience of moving my arm is actually moving. Isn't that lucky? Now, you can...
Not for people with phantom limbs. Cut your arm off, and you may still experience the sensation of moving your arm.
parody this to say, God's mental experiences line up in a fortunate way. When God has the experience of turning water into wine, water is actually turning into wine. Isn't that lucky? Now, the former summary is actually hiding a Bayesian argument behind it, based on a verified prediction. The probability that we'd have psychophysical harmony, given theism, is high. The probability that we'd have it, given naturalism, is low. We update on the fact that we observe psychophysical harmony, and theism's probability goes up. Now, what's the argument that's hiding behind the objection from psycho-divine harmony? Can we construct a parallel Bayesian argument based on some verified prediction?
Oh my goodness. So let's get this straight. What if, to the consensus of seemings, once again, other minds don't make sense, and we can't make our exhaustive list of what are coherent and incoherent experiences? I think, just given the religious diversity and moral landscape of the world, that this argument really only works with a bunch of privileged goobers watching YouTube who have general and very weak agreements on a lot of things. Right. Yeah. And if an omnipotent being exists that can give you a revelatory experience that exists outside of your psycho harmony or whatever, at any point that could be introduced, there is no regularity or testability to that either on theism. And it is something that you should expect if you believe the Bible, that God doesn't have to operate according to our mental laws or seemings. He could just reveal himself, show his rear end to you, and make your face glow, just like Moses. And that wouldn't be coherent or rational to most people. But we got to trust that.
Let's see. First, we need to ask what theism predicts here. Well, theism predicts that God's mind would have coherent laws that govern it, and God's mind makes sense because a coherent mind is a good thing.
It makes sense that when people see my ass, their face glows. That makes total sense.
And God is defined as the most good being possible. Naturalism predicts that, well, that God doesn't exist. So there just wouldn't be any laws that govern God's mind. So now, what do we update on? Well, there isn't anything that we can update on because we can't directly observe God's mind. So this all just falls apart. There is no prediction-based Bayesian argument here. But I still think that there may be another sort of objection here. Again,
Doesn't God's mind not make sense? Doesn't First Corinthians say that the things revealed to us are foolishness to the wise? That we can't comprehend the mind of God? That God is incomprehensible. So the incomprehensible gives rise to the incomprehensible. The uncoherent God gives rise to us incoherent creatures. Wow. I'm so proud that we've got psycho God disharmony or psycho God incoherence that we can emulate here on this earth.
Again, less simple theories are less probable. So, since the laws that govern God's mind are super complicated, one could argue that this makes theism super improbable. Now, I have 4 objections to this argument. My main objection is that a simple theory can entail complicated things without thereby making the theory unsimple. And I've previously argued that the theory "there is a perfect being" is really simple. So even if God would need to have complex laws that govern his mind, this wouldn't count against the theory's simplicity at all, because it's just one entailment of my theory, albeit a complicated one. But setting that aside, I don't think the laws that govern God's mind.
And it gets more complicated when you have to use the Bible. For a Christian channel positing this argument, your own scriptures make your argument stupid or impossible. You can't have both of these things. Either God is unknowable, too great to fathom, incoherent to us meager creatures, or he's knowable. I love it when preachers like Kenny get at us and they're like, well, it's got to be revealed in spirit and in truth, and then you will really know God. No, but know in what sense? Is it exhaustive? Is it always coherent? Is it uh,
God's mind are actually all that complicated. I think they can all be reduced to: if something is true, God believes it; if something is good, God desires it; and if God intends something to happen, it happens. So even if
God predicted that 2,000 plus infants would be killed at the hands of Herod. If he didn't want to fulfill that prophecy, if he wanted to fulfill that prophecy, it was good to kill all of Jesus's contemporarily born civilians.
if this added complexity did decrease theism's probability, it would only be by the tiny complexity of these 3 short laws. But on top of all of this, theists have an escape hatch. Many traditions within theism posit that God is not a mind, nor does he even resemble a mind. If God doesn't have a mind, then we don't even need psycho-divine harmony. But let's just ignore all of that and pretend that because of psycho-divine harmony, the probability of theism is...
If God does not have a mind, then he could never have been an incarnate human to make choices, to choose to be crucified, where Jesus says, I lay my life down and I take it up again. Whoopsie. Good morning, Erica. Good to have you here. That's MRS, Lewis, to you, mister.
Theism is rendered super low. Fine. The thing is, though, even if theism gets a big probabilistic hit because of psycho-divine harmony considerations, naturalism may very well get an even bigger hit because of psychophysical harmony considerations. So, in the end, I'm very confident that this objection doesn't work, but even if it does work, it still doesn't. So, with all the points and counterpoints analyzed, what score do I give this argument? Well, if we have 2 sets A and B, the number of possible relations between sets A and B is 2 to the power of the product of the size of set A and the size of set B. We can use this to deduce that the number of epistemically possible sets of psychophysical laws is 2 to the power of the product of the size of the set of all physical structures, which I'll denote P, and the size of the set of all mental experiences, which I'll denote M. This is an insanely large number. The sheer number of physical structures possible with our physics.
One of the other irritating things about this argument is that, so he's saying that there's this, nigh infinite set of psychophysical laws. And let's just exchange that for the easier thing to say is cognitive experiences. That there's an epistemic probability of potentially infinite cognitive experiences that map to physical states. There we go. And each one of those is a psychophysical law. But what the atheist or naturalist could say is that no, these are just that particular agent's definitions of the physical experiences that they're having. Those aren't laws because another agent could have the same substrates or stimuli and register that experience with another definition. Again, think of attraction and repulsion phenomenons in, particular kinks or synesthesia conditions and things like that. They aren't objective laws, but this argument seems to make this conflation very quickly and wrap and redress it in a way that you have to go, what the hell are we even talking about?
Physics alone is massive, but P here includes all epistemically possible physical structures as well. And the sheer number of experiences humans can undergo is massive. But M here includes all epistemically possible experiences as well. So these two unimaginably large numbers are then multiplied together and then exponentiated. Saying that the result is super duper ridiculously huge is an understatement. Now, the probability of getting psychophysical...
And in all actuality, it would be really huge. But just because something has a lot of possible outcomes doesn't mean that there's divine agency behind it. Think of, I own an incredible amount of Legos. And just because it's epistemically possible for me to create an infinite number of built combinations of these Legos does not mean that there is some divine agent building all of those Legos. Sure, there's an agent or there's some antecedent cause, but, or like, what if there's like a storm that rips through my basement and happens to snap together a particular set of pieces? A natural phenomenon has created a combination that seems equivalent to an agent cause, but is just a product of the system itself. And it would be highly improbable, but it's just determined by the interactions of the materials. There's nothing we can do or say about it. The same could be true of our brain states and our nerves and our registering of those experiences. Sure, that number could be ridiculously high, but it's not necessarily caused by some spirit or being or divine agency.
Physical harmony, given naturally, is going to be roughly in the ballpark of the number of epistemically possible sets of psychophysicals that produce psychophysical harmony divided by the total number of epistemically possible sets of psychophysical laws. But that bottom number is going to be so insanely massive that it's not even worth considering the top number. We could basically just ignore it. As an analogy, 1,000,000 divided by a googolplex is going to be practically equivalent to 1 divided by a googolplex in most scenarios, so we could just ignore the million in the numerator. Now, the score of this argument is going to be the probability of getting psychophysical harmony given theism divided by the probability of getting psychophysical harmony given naturalism. Doing some rearranging, we find that the score of this argument is roughly in the ballpark of 2 to the power of p times m. If I had to actually put a value to that, I think that a googolplex would be a conservative estimate. Yeah, I didn't think that arguments in philosophy of religion could be this strong. You might be wondering why I would even be making a cumulative case series if this one argument single handedly proves theism. Well, this argument is still pretty new, and it might have some flaw that is yet to be discovered, so I don't want to rest the case for theism on this single argument in case that happens. In fact, I would actually really appreciate it if you, the viewer, shared this video so that if there is a flaw,
I have shared this video, and here's the deal, apologetics scared of reality. If the C fibers are part of our DNA, which God designed, and they correlate to sin experiences, everybody say it with me now, God designed sin. You're welcome. If God did not design C fibers that create sin states or sin experiences, then what did? Right? Do I need to present you a false dichotomy? Or if the fall of man did not entail God's removal of our C fibers only choosing righteousness or goodness, then once again, God designed sin, right? If God orchestrated what we lost in the fall of man, then he designed or orchestrated what we gained from the fall, the sin nature that maps onto experiences that we label as sins, right? In fact, if psychophysical harmony is true and God ordains some parts of human experiences as sin that we have to agree upon are sins, then he knew in advance and created us to experience those things as sin, or to at least label them as sin. So then again, you have God designing and defining sin. The all loving God created and foreknew and designed the conditions that cause incoherence, suffering, frustration, and pain. You're welcome, Apologetics Squared. I mean, Apologetics Scared of Reality. That's the flaw in your argument. As soon as you have to use your stinking Bible, it completely poops this whole thing up. Yeah, Michael, you're going to get probably as like the first paid search result is Dustin Crummett's crummy paper that once he actually has to put a Bible next to it or map the Christian worldview into this argument, it's going to create a whole bunch of theological mess that they need to stop using this argument. I predicted a month ago when or no, maybe even 2 months ago when I did a stream about Dustin's crappy argument. It's that this argument was going to make the apologetics rounds, much like when Capturing Christmas has a conference, right? He's got to go on Inspiring Philosophy and Trinity Crybaby Radio and tout, oh, the conference is coming. And now it's like, oh, the Catholic is coming. And oh, the psychophysical harmony is so strong. It's the best argument ever. It makes the rounds. They're passing it almost as fast as COVID. And it's the worst argument. It's the worst argument when you have to marry it to Christian theism. I don't know how they don't see it. It just blows my freaking mind. Maybe one of them will actually watch this stream and realize, wow, this argument is bad. It's bad when I have to map its entailments onto the claims of the Bible, let alone try and interpret passages that were once coherent in my Christian theism and framework, but now are a complete mess once I have to adopt this as a strong argument for theism. Um, so there you go. That was our video for today. I hope you enjoyed uh, a little time with Nitty on your lunch break or your work day. Let's see what's going on in the chat. I'm seeing an article from Emerson Green, so that's a plus probably. Yeah, he covered this too on his YouTube channel, and they go like into the whole Bayesian mess, but I skip over all that. I like talking about Jesus and the Bible and Christian theism and its entailments and its beliefs. And I think that, again, if they want to have this argument in their apologetics parade, we need to show up to their channels and show them, let's pair this with your core tenets of your faith and see how well it does. Because it doesn't. You get straight for Jesus. Right. Like, and I think the very fact that God creates laws that correlate to things that you categorize as incoherent or sin or evil means that he either foreknows that our C fibers, our psychophysical laws will produce these results, or he designed them to be the case if our um, bodily makeup can't do otherwise. So it's just a really bad argument, guys. I can't save it from itself. You know what? Maybe they should keep using it so that more atheists can be like me and show them the problems with it. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah. I'm down for that. You guys down for that? I'm down for that. Okay, well, this is probably the last stream I'm going to do before Christmas because I want to take a break for the holidays. Maybe I'll show up with Tux on a show. Yeah, got a lot going on, a lot of travel, a lot of giving kids gifts. I hope you guys stay safe and warm and unbury yourselves from all the snow that we're supposed to get in the Midwest. And be safe and have a wonderful day because that's Nitty. We'll see you next time.